Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is where we talk about everything and anything under the sun that has to do with psychology and the mind. So if this is your first time here, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you can join us for our upcoming videos. And for those of you who have been here before, welcome back. We're so glad to have you here. Today our topic is going to be quite interesting. We will be unpacking the science behind synesthesia. Have you ever heard of this before? Well, synesthesia is a perceptual phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to automatic, involuntary experiences in a second sensory or cognitive pathway. Let me explain. When you hear a certain song, do you get flashes of certain colors in your head? You taste certain flavors when you see certain shapes? If yes, then you might just have synesthesia. Some people experience synesthesia as a mere association between their senses, while others describe it as an actual blending of the senses. For example, a person who has grapheme-color synesthesia might always see the number 4 in green. It's not a symbolic representation of the number in their mind, but they actually see the color green whenever they see the number. Sounds pretty amazing, right? Well, this is just one of the many types of synesthesia that exist. According to a study by Eagleman in 2007, there are over 80 different forms of synesthesia. Some of the most common ones are as follows. First, we have grapheme-color synesthesia, which is what we talked about earlier, where letters or numbers trigger the experience of color. Then we have sound-to-color synesthesia, which is when you hear sounds and see colors. One famous person who had this form of synesthesia was Vasily Kandinsky, a Russian painter. He said that he started painting what he saw in his mind when he listened to music. Next, we have a taste that sounds like texture, which means that you experience certain textures in your mouth when you hear different sounds. For example, you might feel a rough texture when listening to brass instruments and a smooth texture when listening to string instruments. The opposite of this is texture that tastes like sound. Here you experience different tastes in your mouth when you touch different textures. You may taste chocolate when touching something soft and cotton candy when touching something rough. After this, we have time and space synesthesia, which is when you literally see time passing by. A common form of this is when you see seconds ticking by as individual grains of sand falling from a glass. Then we have odoranosia, which is when you associate specific odors with specific people. Have you ever smelled a certain scent and instantly thought of a certain person? It could be a form of synesthesia. Now, these are only a few of the many types of synesthesia that exist. There are plenty more out there. The question now is, how do you develop synesthesia? Scientists are still trying to find out exactly how and why people develop synesthesia, but there are a few theories. One of the leading theories is the neurological explanation. According to researchers, people who experience synesthesia have a lower threshold for sensory activation. In other words, it takes less stimulation for them to experience the blended senses. For example, if you were to place a little dot of red paint on a piece of paper and place that piece of paper on a table in front of a synesthete, they would not only see the color red, but they would also taste red too. They might taste cherries or strawberries, for example. On the other hand, if you were to place a blue piece of paper on the table, they would not only see the color blue, but they would also taste blue, which could be something like cotton candy or blueberries. This is because the two areas of the brain that are responsible for processing color and taste are connected by a neural network. Another theory to explain synesthesia is the association theory. According to this theory, synesthetic associations are learned during childhood. For example, if you grew up hearing classical music while looking at colorful fireworks, you may end up associating the two together. So when you hear the music later on in life, you might see the fireworks in your mind. But that's not all. According to some experts, this process doesn't necessarily need to happen during childhood. Rather, it can occur throughout a person's lifetime. For example, let's say you start working out and you listen to heavy metal music every time you lift weights. Over time, you might start associating the two together. So the next time you listen to heavy metal music, you might feel the urge to work out. Now, it's important to note that synesthesia is not a hallucination. A hallucination is something that you see, hear, or feel that isn't actually there. For example, if you see a green doorknob when you walk into a room, that's a hallucination because doorknobs aren't green. However, if you have synesthesia and see the number 4 in green, that's not a hallucination because the number 4 is actually there. You're just experiencing an additional sense along with it. It's also important to note that synesthesia is not a disorder. In fact, many people argue against the idea of calling it a perceptual phenomenon at all. Instead, they argue that it should be considered a separate sense. According to Eagleman in 2007, synesthesia should be added to the traditional five senses as the sixth sense. He calls this synesthesia a true sense. Moving on, now that we know what synesthesia is, let us take a look at some of the advantages that people who have synesthesia have over those who do on UNDI. According to research, people with synesthesia perform better on tasks that require creativity and divergent thinking. This makes sense because people with synesthesia are able to use their senses in a more open-ended way. They are not limited to just seeing things in black and white or just hearing things in mono audio. Rather, they're able to see shades of color and hear different layers of sound. Because of this, they're often more creative and better at thinking outside the box. In addition, people with synesthesia also tend to be more sensitive to their environment. This is because they're constantly bombarded with a barrage of sensory input. For example, if you were to walk into a crowded party, a synesthete would probably be overwhelmed by all the different sights, sounds, smells, and tastes around them. As a result, they might need to take some time to decompress before they can enjoy themselves. However, this heightened sensitivity can also be a good thing. Many synesthetes report that their sensitivity makes them more aware of their surroundings. They're able to pick up on subtle details that most people miss, which allows them to have a deeper appreciation for the world around them. For example, a synesthete might notice the beautiful colors of a sunset or the intricate patterns of a snowflake. They might also be able to pick up on nonverbal cues that most people miss, such as facial expressions or body language. This can make them better at communicating with others and building relationships. So what do you think? Synesthesia a blessing or a curse? Let us know in the comments below. Finally, let's take a look at some of the disadvantages that people with synesthesia have. As we mentioned earlier, synesthesia can make people more sensitive to their environment. While this can be a good thing in some cases, it can also be a bad thing. For example, if there's a lot of chaos and stimulation around, a synesthete might become easily overwhelmed and stressed out. This can make it difficult for them to function in everyday life. In fact, some synesthetes struggle so much with this that they have to avoid certain places altogether. For example, they might avoid going to parties or concerts because they know they'll be overstimulated. In addition, people with synesthesia can also have difficulty concentrating. This is because they're constantly bombarded with sensory input. It can be difficult for them to tune out the world around them and focus on one specific task. For example, if you were to ask a synesthete to read a book in a noisy environment, they would probably find it difficult to concentrate. The sounds around them would make it hard for them to focus on the words on the page. Despite these disadvantages, though, most people who have synesthesia wouldn't trade it in for the world. In fact, many people see their synesthesia as a gift. They're grateful for the unique way that they experience the world. Do you know anyone with synesthesia? If so, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe so you can join us for our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.